the past couple of months, there have been some kind of agitation on who will be the next president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Well, after the election conducted on the 23rd of this month, President Muhammadu Buhari emerged the winner of the election, giving him another 4 years to drive Nigeria's economic growth. President Muhammadu Buhari's campaign catch this time was the next level. And so what should be the next level? Let's talk to an economic analyst and the CEO of Flame Academy and Consulting Limited, Mr. Orji Udemezue. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Udemezue.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always my pleasure to be here.
All right. In 2015, when President Buhari was vying to come into power, he listed about 5-point change agenda. Remember, change was the
yes, word, yeah.
Exactly. And now we have next level.
Next level.
And he talked about providing employment, and then fighting insecurity, fighting corruption, improving infrastructure,
diversifying the economy. There's a lot.
And good health. So how much, let's even begin, how much would you say he has, or this administration, his first administration, has achieved in this 4 years?
Well, it's been a mixed scorecard. And looking at the circumstances that this government met when they came in, you know, the very low oil prices, one would say that they were a bit constrained, you know, in driving the kind of economic growth and development that we want in this nation. But then you also look at the fact that the government did not start with the kind of momentum that the global market expected. Remember that when the government started then, because I mean, we need to remind ourselves of this so that we can correct these things as we look at the next 4 years. You know, it took almost 6 months. You know, prior to that election, there was so much uncertainty and risk. So Nigeria investors actually deserted the country. But after the election, with the magical call that came from Jonathan to President Buhari, you know, the whole sentiment about Nigeria changed. And the whole international, environment became very positive towards Nigeria. And investors were very eager to cash in into this market. And the sentiment was so awesome. And then we wasted the, what do you call it now, the momentum that, we had at that point. There was a long delay in appointing, ministers of government, and then even when they now came on board, policies were very slow in coming out. And when the policies started coming out, we saw some bit of policy inconsistency to a good extent. And of course, the ruling party couldn't also put their houses in order. Some positioning and all of that didn't happen, and they blamed that to a lot of slowness. So I wouldn't score them very highly in the past 4 years, but I'm very hopeful. Because if all of us hold them accountable, I'm hopeful that in the next 4 years, we could see something better.
Okay, now they are talking about the next level. So what do you think the next level should be?
Well, the next level for me should be a level that must move from incompetence to competence. That's what I see. All right? Remember, Nigeria today, is quite sadly the poverty capital of the world. So for me, the beginning of that next level is that we must, as much and as fast as possible, drop that world poverty capital tag on us. Everything we can do as a government, as a people, to drop that tag, we must do immediately. That's for me the beginning of the next level. We can't afford to continue to answer the global poverty capital of the world. It's a shame with the kind of resources that we have, human resources, natural resources, and all of that. So I think that we are going to hold this government accountable to see that we are dragged away from this shameful tag. And we can do it. We have what it takes to do it. Nigeria today faces a very huge, a danger of economic implosion. The level of unemployment is very troublesome. And once you have a very high level of unemployment, it comes with it a lot of crime, antisocial activities, insurgents, terrorism and all of that. And that's what actually is playing out. So we need to solve this. And this, instead of creating jobs in the past 4 years, we've actually lost a lot of jobs and companies have closed down. So next level for me means we must begin to create jobs and we must begin to encourage companies to work. encourage SMEs to be on ground, to create jobs and engage young people. And Nigeria has a very young population, and it's dangerous. When you have a lot of young people in your population, you must engage them. When you fail to engage them, they engage themselves, and you know the result. Yahoo, crisis everywhere, rape, antisocial activities, terrorism, and all of that. And we have a birth rate today that is much higher, than our growth rate. And it means that if you look at Nigeria in the past 4 years, we have consecutively gone down on our GDP per capita. It's approaching $1,800 now, something that was about $3,000 or more dollars per head. So we are consistently going down in that because of the high birth rate with a very slow or suppressed growth rate. So these are clear issues that we must deal with. Okay, so now in trying to deal with them, I have what I have called a 10-point agenda for this government.
You have 10-point agenda.
10-point agenda.
The president in 2015 had 5-point agenda. Perhaps he might come up with a maybe 7-point agenda.
Well, my own is not actually, my own is 10 things I think they must focus on.
All right, let's hear
Number one, this government must do everything possible to unite Nigerians. It may not be in terms of economic agenda, but it's very important. Unity is very critical. We are so divided.
He has promised to, have an inclusive government.
Promises are not issues with this government. This government is not lacking when it comes to promises. What is important to us now is to match promises with actions. Let us ensure that this say-do ratio of this government approaches unity. We want them to do as much as they say they will do. And if they can do that, I'm actually very encouraged by the kind of statements that the president made in his acceptance speech. All right? Even though, some people are contesting the result, but that's, by the way, let's wait until that process, ends. But for now, we have to, work with, the result that we have from INEC. We have to work with it. And in working with it, we have to hold this government accountable to unite this nation. Let the things that they say, be close to what they do. How can we unite this country? Because we're so divided as a nation. And a lot of sentimental and tribal remarks and threats going on. It's so much. So I want the president to begin now to engage key stakeholders, our traditional rulers, captains of industry, and begin to speak the word of peace. Let us unite our people. Let us stop the threats. So much tribal, even Lagos, a cosmopolitan city, is even those tribal threats today. It's not nice. It's not good. We're going to end up driving away the little goodwill that we have in some of our big cities. When you hear Abuja, you hear Port Harcourt, you hear Lagos, people understand that even though we are, invaded by terrorism, that you can never get to these places. Even though we have, killings and all, it won't get there. But what's happening today must be curbed immediately. Whoever that is accountable to the threats we're receiving today in Lagos by whatever tribe, against whatever tribe, it must be stopped. These are time bombs that are tickling. And when we hear Rwanda experience and all of that, it takes a build-up. If you go online, you see what kind of comments are going on. Do you imagine that, the killings that happened in Kaduna 2 days ago and the one that happened in Zamfara yesterday, people are now more like, we don't care anymore. Kill yourselves. That's a very terrible thing to a nation. We are, how do I put it, killing our love for one another. This government must deal with that immediately. Very important. Without unity, there won't be prosperity and progress.
All right.
Secondly, in my agenda, they must assemble a great team. Yes, it's a continuity, more like, but they must, juggle their team, I believe. In as much as the same government coming up by May 29, I think there must be some rearrangement. Round peg into a round hole. The economic team must be very sound. The people in the Ministry of Finance must be very sound. The person that handles our infrastructure, the Ministry of Works and so on, and all sectors, agriculture, all the critical sectors must be manned properly. Put people in the right places where they have skills and proper training to run affairs of this nation. I'm not saying sack people, but I'm just saying rearrange and bring in fresh thoughts, fresh ideas where they need to do that. We must run this country as a business. It's very important, in that respect. And number 3 for me is secure this nation. Secure Nigeria. High insecurity is a disincentive for investment. We always focus on foreign investors. What about local investors? Many local investors today have just kept their money in some fixed income securities and just watching. They don't have any encouragement to invest. We need to have things like, tomato purees, agricultural, post-harvest technology businesses, and people are holding capital. Whether it is stolen fund or not stolen fund, this capital are not being invested here. They're all finding their way out of the country. If we don't have security in different parts of the country, and we hope that we curtail what's going on right now. Just 2 days after the election, we had an attack in Kaduna. Many lives were lost. And in this country now, human life is worth nothing anymore. In some nations, I'm not talking about UK now or America. In some African countries, people die in 5 or 6. The whole country is shut down. And you pay huge respect to human lives that have been lost. When 5, 6 people die. Our elder statesman, Anyaku, made reference to that. When he was called, when an event was going on in the country where he was, and the whole activity was shut down because 6 people died. In Nigeria, people die in 20s, 30s, and 100s, and we all say, oh, it's happening over there. We carry on as if nothing happened. And government does not even pay any. The highest they would say is that, oh, we will bring these people to book, they will regret this thing that happened, and it ends there. What a nation. There's no value for human life in Nigeria, and if that does not change, we will remain a debased and a dehumanized society. So that must be dealt with. Security must be provided, and let us stop dividing or distracting our security forces. Nigerian military has become so debased, I'm sorry to say this. They have been so involved in things that shouldn't be involved in politics and all of that. They have been so politicized. And I've had personal contact with some military officers. There's never a time in Nigerian history that these people feel that's lack of sense of commitment to the national cause. They are divided among themselves. Whether it's about corruption, about how to acquire military wares, corruption about how to deal with staff welfare. They are complaining that monies that are meant to come to them are said to be released up there, but it doesn't get to them. So the military must put their house in order. The police must do the same thing. Back then, you feel safe when you run into a military station, no matter the part of the country where you are. For example, you are from the east or from the west, and you have a crisis in the north, and you run into a military, you feel safe. Today, it may not be the same. Because we have seen cases where it's alleged that these same forces are even helping to kill Nigerians. It's very sad. And the kind of stories that we heard about this election is I don't want to go into details, but we must deal with this issue. Let us begin to, refocus these, security forces to fight, properly in line with their mandate. Those who are meant to, create, handle peace and security in the society should do that. Those who are meant to defend our, territorial integrity should do that. Let's not bring them into things that shouldn't concern. But once you bring them into politics, they begin to act not in national interest, but in party and individual interest. It's very dangerous for a nation. Then, let's look at the petroleum industry bill. We're talking about agenda.
Yes.
Now election is over. I humbly hope and pray that the president will come back again and look at the oil and gas sector. We need to bring transparency into that sector. We've had people who said they will sell NNPC or they will privatize and all of that. The whole idea is, let us bring transparency to that sector. Whether you are going to, sell partly or you're going to privatize decently, bring the right people to run this sector. Let us privatize. Let us bring about transparency. Let investors have confidence. Because what we have seen is that most investors have been going to places like Ghana, Angola, and the rest of them to, do new projects. Greenfield projects are lacking in our oil and gas sector. New investments are finding their ways to other destinations. And there are several competitors to Nigeria. So let us look at this bill that have been broken into 4 parts. The first one that has, have stored on the table of the president, the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill. Let's start with that. And as we go in those stages, we look at other bills, fine-tune them, and make sure we go to... I beg this government to look at this sector, because this is a sector that's still holding us together in terms of revenue delivery. If we don't do well with this sector, we may crash sooner than later, because the other sectors that should help us are not yet put together, like agriculture. So I urge this government to make it a very serious issue as they commence in May 29 to look at the oil and gas sector, to bring in transparency and encourage or boost investment. Let's also have a new approach to infrastructure. Number what now? I think number 5 or 6?
Yeah.
Infrastructure is very important. Now, I want to commend the government in the kind of attention they've actually paid to infrastructure in the past 3 years. It's commendable, even though, as an analyst, I move around this country by air, by road sometimes, and I don't think that the amount of money I've had this government, publish or show us in trillions. Last year budget is at 1.7 trillion and so on. I don't think I personally am seeing them in projects or I'm reading them in reports in terms of how much these projects have moved up, whether it's Badagry Express or the Apapa project or even the airports. In the rail line, we've seen a lot of activities, yes. But even those activities that were carried over from the last government. Let us, pay more attention to this infrastructure stuff. And remember, I think it was the African Development Bank or so that suggested that Nigeria would need about $100 billion annually for the next 30 years to be where we should be infrastructure-wise. So bring that to reality. What is today's reality? In the past 3 years, even with a more focused spend on infrastructure, we've only done about $10 billion in past 3 years. That averages about $3.33 billion in infrastructure. That is just a meager 3% of what we require to be able to get to where we should be, wholesomely as a nation, in this country.
Talking about infrastructure, we know that the issue of the port, what we have, the development there at the port has really been a major concern.
It's horror.
A lot of people. So what do you think this the new administration of President Muhammad Buhari should do in that regard?
We must urgently, we should stop the tribal sentiments and urgently look at this nation as a project. You can't allow all the trailers and all the, people in this country coming to Lagos to carry goods. Look at what's happening in Lagos today. We are besieged. We are trapped. We are horrified by these trailers on daily basis. Even coming here this morning, I know what I went through. The whole Apapa, axis is closed down. People are, living in horror. People have abandoned their property and all of that. Real estate has become horrible in Apapa, and government looks away. Meanwhile, when some special human beings come into Lagos, the trailers clear away. We can't solve this problem without looking at ports, like you mentioned. Let us look at the Onitsha port, the Calabar port, the Warri port, and if you can find dry ports even in the north, maybe in Kano, where a lot of business are going on. Let's look at these opportunities, and even the cargo, system. Let's find a way to, decentralize this thing happening in this country, because it is the failure of the part that's haunting us today. We must, as a government, sit back and then bring in the right investment, dredge the rivers that we need to dredge to allow some, vessels, even if it's not the mother vessel, we can do ship-to-ship transfer at some point, and the vessels move straight to Warri, to Port Harcourt, to Calabar, to Onitsha, to Kano, other places, and then we save ourselves from this danger we have here. And for me, infrastructure-wise, this government must begin to think differently. I gave you data, about what we require against what we currently do. It just tells you that Nigerian government, no matter how hard we try, we can never, settle or deal with the infrastructure problem as a government. Mind you, our debt service to revenue ratio is currently above 60%. And what is left is not even enough to pay our salaries. Hence, the salary arrears that we face. So we almost always have to borrow every year to do the little we can do in infrastructure. So what's the solution? Let us stop doing the same thing every year and keep thinking we'll get the same result. Allow private funds to come into infrastructure. That's the only way. I've spoken about private-public partnership on this stage several times. And we're still thinking the same way. This will happen. They will not do. Government should provide the regulatory and legal framework to allow investors come into our infrastructure sector to create space. For the port, for example, allow somebody, just give the right of way, provide the laws, provide guarantee and security, and allow somebody dredge our river.
Mr. Domeswe, you just have to hold your thoughts there. You've given us 7 points. So I guess we still have 3 more, so let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with that conversation. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying tuned, and if you've just joined us, you're watching Business Morning on Channels Television, and we've been looking at agenda setting for the new administration of re-elected President Muhammadu Buhari, and I still have here with me Mr. Orji Udemezue. Well, Amongst your 10-point
yes,
agenda, you've been able...
to one.
Okay, yeah, talking about infrastructure.
And I was just going to say that government should please invite the private sector, international investors, local investors, and give guarantees and assurances that whatever agreement we reach with you, that we'll keep them. Whether it's a 20-year or 30-year involvement, you know, there are different models of PPP, which I cannot discuss right now, but let's adopt the model that's appropriate for us. But definitely, there's no way in Nigeria, I'm very clear about that, you can take this to the bank, there's no way Nigeria can meet our infrastructure target without involving the private sector. So the earlier we do that, the better. And that also comes to the 7th one, agriculture. Agriculture is still a major constituent or component of our, domestic productivity.
Yeah, and if we're talking about diversifying the economy, we should look at that.
And agriculture, employs much more people in this country than any other sector in this economy. Even though most of them are just hand-to-mouth subsistence farming. But more than 60% of Nigerians are employed by agriculture. How can we make agriculture, a bit more attractive and interesting? How can we create big-time projects with very, very nice real estate development, housing provision and all of that, where people can do their farm, maybe a plantain, a plantation and all of that, or a cassava farm and all of that, and you build, apartments for people, and create, nearby factories where post-harvest technology processing can happen, and the people are doing some sexy farm work, and they are loving it, and we are being more productive. How can we do that? Government needs to look at agriculture more. I think we need to have a younger and more dynamic minister in that sector, with due respect to our current minister, who may actually be very engaged in some other sector of the economy. Because he's also
I think we have younger, youths going into agriculture these days.
Who know how to do these things, who can bring in new ideas, fresh ideas, post-harvest technology, and some digital system, to reach out to farmers, whether you're sharing fertilizer or seedlings or whatever. Let's get this done properly, and let's do a balanced approach.
Okay, talking about
what you're doing in the north, you're doing in the south, you're doing in the west, so that we have a wholesome, development in the agricultural sector to boost our revenue earnings and provide employment.
Talking about fertilizer, looking at it, perhaps some of the incentives given to these farmers.
Yes.
Remember the central bank came up with
the program and all of those.
Borrowers. I mean, where would you say the anchor borrowers are really taking agriculture?
Let me say it clearly that the Central Bank of Nigeria has been the only institution, doing everything they can, even beyond their own mandate, to see that this economy does not fail.
So
kudos to the central bank governor on that respect. I have my own thumb down for him when it comes to FX management. But on the issue of anchor borrowing, trying to finance businesses, the central bank governor must be commended. Because, with the failure of fiscal policies, central bank government has waded in. And in terms of managing inflation, central government has exhausted everything possible in monetary policy drive. That's why we have had our NPR remained at 14% for the past almost 2 years. CRR has been unchanged, even though the reality is that manufacturers cannot access money at the rate that they do now.
So what does that tell you of the synergy between the Monetary Policy Authority and the Fiscal Authority?
There is a very poor policy coordination. In economics, you call that policy coordination.
So would that be part of your agenda?
Issue, then we used to have a coordinating minister for. I think this president should begin to shop. I'm not sure Gojo Kojiwala will agree to come back, but I think people in his. I think Akinwumi, for me, caught seat. Professor Soludo caught seat for me. The number of other professors we have in the West, here in the South, in the North, who can do this. We need to bring people, sorry about that. But the point I'm saying is that we need to look around this country and get people who know how to do these things, to coordinate the economy. We have people in the North, in the South, everywhere, to coordinate the monetary policy and fiscal policy. Because when these policies are rolled out, while one policy is achieving one good, it's causing a problem somewhere. So with good coordination, we can get things balanced. So I think this government should begin to look for competent hands to manage our policy coordination. That's the way I look at it. Then, from agriculture, let me move to fighting corruption, the big masquerade. In my view, Nigeria's corruption cannot be fought the way it's being fought currently. The best way going forward to fight our corruption is to make institutions work. What I have termed here, governance. Let this government begin to promote sound governance in customs, in the police force, in the military, in NPA Ports Authority, in waterways, every sector, in public sector, in private sector, let our governance code be, aligned. Let institutions, let judiciary work, the legislature, let everybody do their work, and let's hold ourselves accountable. Let's test our systems and bring out the best out of them. That way, corruption will come down. And, the loopholes that we see will evaporate. Then, rounding off quickly, education and health are two big issues.
Well, they are part of the infrastructure.
Yes, we must bring private sectors beyond just building universities. How do we bring people to build massive health facilities and allow them to benefit from it, bringing investors across the world? And then finally, social program of this government should be reviewed. We move it towards access to funds for SMEs and entrepreneurs.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ojudemezue, for this wonderful 10-point agenda. Well, let's just hope that things get better.
Nigeria belongs to all of us. So